Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I have a video for you that is not so much a review or a disassembly or anything else. It is an impassioned plea. It is my just trying to maybe put some ideas into people's head that I really hope will genuinely help some people out there into the world. My plea in its short is to be mindful of how you're spending your money in the EDC world and do the most good that you can when you can spend. And this is going to mostly be a spoken video, so you're welcome to go do the dishes or whatever, or just log off if all you got's my voice. I don't know, man. But anyways, I digress. Look, the world is in a pretty wacky state. Let's just be real. And tough times are coming, or maybe already here for a lot of us out there, right? And I don't want to talk about why or how or what we have to do to fix it, right? I'm just acknowledging that unless you're a big old dragon sitting on a rapidly increasing hoard of gold, it is not a pretty world out there at the moment for a lot of folks. And the flush days of gear purchasing may be on hiatus for a little bit. I'm not just saying this, right? We're seeing evidence of this. The bottom is falling out of the secondary market on knives, watches, nearly everything else, right? It is pretty rough out there. The prices are obviously skyrocketing. Retailers are suffering. And talking to people in the knife industry, it's starting to get a little bit scary, right? People still need tools. They always will, but oh boy, is it getting a little stressful. And so as we're going into rough times, I kind of want to make a plea that as you're spending what you can, you think very carefully about how to do some good with the money that you are going to spend. And I want to be clear before we go any further, this is not me telling you what to do with your money. I'm not giving financial planning advice, right? I'll say what I've always said. It's not a great idea to buy luxuries on credit, but beyond that, I'm not here to scold you. I'm not here to tell you do what you want, right? And I know that some of you are doing great. Some of you are going to be really low on cash, and some of you might be in that space where maybe it ain't pretty, but you still have a little money left over for joy. That's kind of where I want to focus this. Again, I hope that as the goal here is to think about when you're spending that money that you can spend, or when you're advising other people how to spend it, even if you don't have a whole lot to throw around, that you're doing that spending, or you're putting that money out there in a way that does as much good as you can. And I'm going to argue that this is a really important time to think about who you're buying from, who you're supporting, and to make sure that the artists that you love are able to get through these kinds of times. So, okay, let's start off. Keep it easy, right? Maybe you've decided that, you know what, you need a really great knife for, you want to buy a Spyderco Delica, right? Like that, great. That's an excellent choice. You will always know how big things are, right? Size comparison. This. Anyways, now, lots of places sell Delicas, right? So the question becomes, well, where do you go to get it? I mean, sure, you could get it from Amazon or a big retailer like that, but even assuming you get a legit knife, which there were questions. But even assuming you get a legit knife, does that particular dragon really need to be sitting on more of your gold right now? And I mean, absolutely. I bet your local sporting goods store chain will have one for you, 100%. Right? You can go to your REI, your Cabela's, your various sorts of places. But again, I think they're probably going to be just fine if you buy that Delica elsewhere. But you know who might not just be fine if everybody chooses to go elsewhere? Your local shops, your small, your medium businesses, right? Right now, I know even the big stores in the cutlery and jewelry spaces are starting to feel the bit of the pinch, right? And so when they're hurting, your local shops may be in a pretty dire moment, right? Just read of a really good shop here in California. The Knife Joker is closing their doors, right? I saw this on Reddit and broke my freaking heart. That's part of what inspired this little rant here, right? And I just talked actually yesterday with a local cutlery shop owner here out in San Diego who is just praying that the fall busy season is somewhere close to a normal year's off season, right? It is pretty scary right now. And even in the watch space, it is harder than ever for local family-owned shops to be competing and staying afloat in a sea of dealer boutiques and corporate chains, right? It's been pretty rough out there. And so if you've got the cash to spend, if you've got the money in hand for your Spyderco Delica, so to speak, then please look up your local family-owned shops, right? Do a search around, see if there's somebody local where you can buy from them. And if you don't have a local-owned shop, or if you do and they're jerks, then find somebody else's local shop and ask them if they ship, right? There are lots of small shops all around, at least here in the U.S., all around the country, who are very, very happy to be somebody else's local shop, if that makes sense, right? And I bet that, yeah, you might pay a little bit more in shipping, but you'll get local service even from somebody across the country. Or failing that, even if you want to go a little bigger, at least support one of the major retailers who supports our community, who's made their home in our space, right? Their business is our hobby, right? And those folks, well, when you give them some money, it's going to do a lot more good for our community than if you just toss it more on Jeff Bezos's pile. You know what I mean? And, sure, okay, I get it. Times are tough. You might save a couple of bucks buying from some mega retailer. Although in cases where you've got like MAP and other forms of price fixing, you might not actually. But nonetheless, even if it costs you a couple of bucks more, wouldn't you rather your money stays local or stays in our community rather than just getting tossed onto the pile under the dragon? At least for me, that makes a lot of sense. Actually, speaking of where the gold goes, I think it's also worth thinking about the manufacturers you're supporting right now. And, okay, I'm going to back up for a second here. To be clear, I know that for many of you, if you've got 20 bucks and you need a knife, you don't really have a lot of choice, right? You're going to walk into your local shop and grab the overseas-made pot metal gas station specials they got there for sale. And you're probably going to do it again in a few months when that one breaks. Let's be real. That's life. And I'm not trying to say here, don't get into the hobby unless you can spend the big bucks. That's crazy, right? There are amazing, 1 or 2 piece collections out there made up of really well-selected budget sorts of pieces, right? Do not feel like you have to spend a lot of money to be valid or valuable in this hobby, right? A well thought out small collection of budget stuff is still really respectable and is a wonderful thing. But instead, what I'm saying here is that if you've only got 1 or 2 purchases to make this year, it's more important than ever to think about the makers that you're supporting. Now, okay, again, I want to be clear. The best deal, if you're just looking to get as much knife as you possibly can for the money, you're probably going to end up going to one of the 10 brand new overseas factories that popped up in the last week on Amazon, right? Let's be real. If you want cheap, that's where cheap is happening lately. And mind you, of course, quality is about effort, not geography. There are great and well-respected knife factories overseas and all over the world, right? But these days, particularly on knife social media, there are new brands popping up, it feels like every damn day, mostly coming out of China. They show up in my inbox around 3 a.m., which I gather is business hours, and just begging me to pay me to talk about their gear, right? They want me so badly to influence, which is probably why you're hearing about some of them on social media. Let's be real. And to be clear, some of these brands may have huge potential. Some of them may end up sticking around and becoming the next generation of your Wies, your Bestecs, your Rayots, etc. Right? And some of them might make really solid knives. But right now, these kinds of no-name brands making barely named knives are out there selling ridiculous specs for tiny prices. And I know that it's real tempting in a time like this, right? And so you could get a great deal in terms of knife specs for very little money if you buy an Erpen Fleep Slugmeyer or whatever the heck it's called this week on Amazon, right? But I want to kind of just highlight that oftentimes this is about compromise. I mean, first off, in all likelihood, your great knife is going to be a distant memory in a month, never to be sold again. As a reviewer, this annoys the heck out of me, right? Because if these companies drop a model and then they get rid of that model in 2 weeks and then drop the next one, it's real hard for a review to stick around and be relevant. There are entire brands where it's just like next, and there's never any ability to build a tradition of. Anyways, I digress. But that's going to be important though, because if you absolutely fall in love with your Erpen Fleep Slugmeyer, what's going to happen in 3, 4, 5 months if there's a problem, right? If you leave it out in the shed and it gets stolen by a squirrel. I don't know if your squirrels steal knives in your area. I kind of hope they don't, right? They're menace enough with. Anyways, I digress. But, what's going to happen there? That's going to be a little bit rough. Second, when you're dealing with your Erpen Fleeps, your customer service may not really be a thing, right? Maybe they'll support it if it breaks. Maybe you can find parts, or maybe you could just buy another one online to scavenge for fasteners, right? Be your own warranty. But in my experience, these brands often have enough service to kind of avoid trashing, getting trashed on Reddit, but that's really about it, right? And even still, if the company goes away in 3 months, then who's going to answer the emails, right? When ErpenFleep.com redirects to nothingness, and now they've moved on to being Sulpenflap, then you know what? You're going to be a little bit up the creek there, so to speak. Third, there were going to be quality questions. Now, to be clear, there are lots of really great knives out there, right? There were great factories doing work with very little prominence, right? But lots of people out there can make a knife-shaped object. right? That's not particularly hard. Fewer people can make a knife that's a decent tool. And even fewer people can design a knife that can serve you potentially for a lifetime, or in the time that you have it will be an incredible piece, right? That takes skill, that takes work. And that's not, again, not about geography. It's just about effort. And a lot of people don't put in that effort to get to the point where they're really great designers, right? And, if they're selling you M390, there were questions like, well, how's the heat treat? If they're selling you M390, but they're treating it like 440, then your M390 is going to be garbage, right? It's going to be a problem. Or have they made other common beginner's mistakes? The number of button locks out there that open in your pocket because they didn't think about that is, well, too damn high, right? Is the lockup say all of these things are really hard to tell, right? If you're just looking on Instagram and you see the latest piece, it can be really hard to spot these kinds of things ahead of time. And if they're just spamming the community with designs, here, take the Slugmeyer, now the Wangfludel, now the Boom Cobbler. I'm running out of design names here, right? This is why I can't work for one of these factories. But anyways, if they're just fire hosing designs, you're probably not going to find a lot of reviews that aren't bought and paid for, right? Because no one will have had it, and by the time that it's reviewable, it's already gone. So you're going to want to be a little bit careful there. That's not to say that there aren't some great knives flying under the radar with the dice roll brands, but by God, it's a thing to consider. And then finally, I think it's worth asking why you're paying so much less, right? Even if we assume that the materials are the same, that they're done well, that's an assumption, big assumption, but it is one, right? And even if we give them kind of the economy of scale benefit, assume that they're skipping some common markup, and there can be a lot of things out there, but I have to wonder, and increasingly it bothers me, wondering whether some of the cost that's making that so much cheaper is human cost. And I don't just mean lower cost of labor, right? But do we know that the people who work there are being treated fairly? Right? Do we know that they're working there of their own accord? Do we know that they're able to do that work and stay healthy? Are they protecting folks? That's a question. Do we know that the people who are building your new gear have good lives and good livelihoods? Right? Those are all questions that matter a lot for me. And I know that to be true about some factories, right? And I don't know that to be true about some other ones, right? And so an awesome knife for an awesome price is a wonderful thing, but I'm becoming increasingly uncomfortable with the idea that I might be paying less money, but at the cost of some human suffering, right? That sounds not great. And it is inevitable in our modern society, unfortunately, right? In many places, you just can't avoid it. So you don't have to look hard for hypocrisy. I can see it already in the comments, but Nick, you hypocrite, you're using a smartphone and that's mine. But yeah, I know. Unfortunately, that sucks. Where's my choices? Right? Or, but Nick, do you know all of that about every brand you've shown on the channel before? Well, no, I don't. And that kind of bothers me some. I'm going to be real here, right? But increasingly, if I have the choice, I want to make that choice, right? I'm not sitting here standing in judgment, right? I have no damn right to stand in judgment. But at the same time, I kind of want to raise the question because it's been bothering me. And I wonder, my hope is that as you're thinking about how to spend the money you've got, you're going to ask the question of if I give this money to these people, what am I doing? What am I supporting, right? Am I supporting employee? Again, this isn't a question of geography. This is a question of humanity. And I don't care, by the way, this isn't about overseas. I don't care if your factory's 3 doors down from my office. If you treat your blades, your customers, your community, your employees like crap, I don't want to support you. You don't deserve to make it through hard times. We should support good people who are good to their customers and good to their people, right? That to me feels really important. And by the way, as an aside, this is a way that I'd love to see new factories sort of standing out, right? Showing the world how well they're treating their people, right? Showing people how good the conditions are. I mean, it's hard to do this in a meaningful way, but if you're the only company who's doing this in, a brand new brand, that could stand out. That could really be pretty impressive. And we've seen that kind of pro-consumer, pro-employee work succeed in other spaces before, right? And even if your top of the line's more expensive, show me that the money's going to making people have good lives, right? YouTube is a great place to do that. But anyways, I digress. But all I'm saying is if you're only going to be able to spend a little bit of money this year, I really encourage you to take that extra time and do the homework, right? Lots and lots of people make amazing knives these days. But if you've got a choice, I'd recommend that you find amazing people and buy their amazing knives because, well, it's probably best that they're the folks who make it through the hard times. Then finally, I'd like to ask you to remember to support the artists, right? Now, sure, supporting big ethical factories in our community is important, absolutely. But some of the people who are going to get hit hardest are the smallest makers. The people with independent shops and a couple of employees, right? That's a really hard place to be in times like this. Custom makers whose business kind of depends on their patrons, depends on their patterns, right? People who are doing this work out of their garage, or new designers with great ideas, but who don't have the backing of huge companies, right? It's really, really important that we support these folks because oftentimes, in my experience, these are the people who move the industry forward, right? They may not be making the big bucks right now, but they are the ones giving us great new designs. They're giving us great new approaches. They're giving us wild ideas. And they are most at risk of shutting down in times like this. It is a lot easier to survive in a rough time as a major factory with a line of credit and a war chest than it is if you are a person where, you sell a knife and great, now I can buy materials for the next knife, and anything left, I guess, goes to food, things like that. And sounds important, right? And yes, I know these folks can be more expensive. Their work can be more expensive. Although, actually, you would be surprised at how much a knife, a little bit of money can get you from an independent maker, particularly in the fixed blade world. Oh my God, you can get so much high-quality fixed blade from small makers for the same price you would pay from big factories. Even from over, like, the value can be wild in the fixed blade world. But anyways, I digress. This is a time in which, spending a little bit more money with a maker, buying one great knife from a small maker may do a whole lot more good than buying 3 good knives from some random factory, right? There will always be another Erpenfleep if you want to support them down the road. But if a great small maker or designer has to give up the knife game and go back to a career that they tried to leave behind, then even once we return to an easier time, which I really hope we do so, we as a community have lost something that we may never get back, and that's not great. And this is why a big part of my gear budget lately has gone to small makers doing incredible work rather than a larger number of factory knives to review, right? I'll be showing that off soon on the channel. This is also, by the way, why I'm going to keep showing you work from people I like across the price range, right? Even when it's not cheap, because I often get comments that are, honestly, they got a point, right? Like, Nick, you out of touch, jackass. No one has $600 to spend on a knife, right? And you know what? I get it. It's rough out there, and it's been rough for a while, but A, some people are making a lot of money right now. Let's be real. But B, I think it's still important to show great things from great people, because I want folks who do have that purchasing power to spend it well and to support great folks, to keep moving the industry forward. And if I stick to the Erpenfleeps for the budget-conscious buyers, then, well, we've already talked about some of the questions I got over there, right? That's been a part of the reason why I've been feeling kind of conflicted lately in the knife market, right? And it's made making videos just a little bit more complicated. I don't know, maybe this, I'm working through my own stuff over here in this video. But anyways, frankly, the other thing is I'm just much more enthusiastic about showing off something great from a good person, even if it's not going to be relevant to every budget. And sometimes I got my hands on something neat and I want to talk about it, plain and simple. That's where I am, and because it's my channel, I get to make that choice. And I'm sympathetic to the fact that it's not doing you a lot of good if your budget is $60 and I'm showing you something that's $600. But at the same time, let me put it this way. I hope your budget changes soon. But anyways, all of this is really, really, I think, relevant right now. Maybe not just in the EDC world. I mean, supporting your community, supporting family-owned business, trying to do good with your money in hard times is probably a good thing to do in every part of your life, knowing, of course, that it's not always possible. But it's never a bad thing to ask the question, right? Like, if I'm about to buy blah, is there a way that I can do that same thing and do a little bit better with it, right? It's not a bad thing to complicate, but I'm sorry, to contemplate. It's also going to be a little complicated, let's be real, but that's not what I meant. Anyways, all of this is to say that, talking to folks I know in the industry, it's kind of rough out there. And frankly, the people I know on the planet, right? So here's hoping we get through this quickly and that we're all back to a place where it's easier to splash the cash on the latest and greatest, so to speak. But now more than ever, I want to encourage you to use the money you can spend to do some good, right? To support local family-owned businesses and retailers that are good to our community. To support manufacturers who offer good products, good service, and good quality while being good to their employees and their community. And by the way, I believe that to be true about all of these folks here on the table, for what it's worth. And where you can, pay the extra price to support the independent makers that keep the industry moving forward and who might have the hardest time making it through your tough times. But most of all, in rough times, I want to encourage you to find joy wherever you can and to be kind to yourself and to others, right? We are all in this together, right? We are all a community, both within the hobby space and, frankly, more generally. And so one of the very best ways to get through tough times is kindness. I really believe that. And so please, go be kind to somebody. Yeah, anyways, I hope this has been interesting to you and that you have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.